right, welcome everyone. A quick reminder that on your app is a survey. If you wouldn't please fill out the survey during and after the panel. But welcome to the Modernizing Your Agency to Advance Your Mission in the Cloud. If you say that 3 times fast, it really sticks in your head. But today's moderators, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Levy, who is the VP of Federal at AWS. Thank you.
Good morning. First, thank you everyone for coming, and I'm really excited about this session. And we've got some very exciting folks here from the federal government, and I'll start off with maybe if we could just get a little bit of introduction. Maybe we'll start with you, David. Maybe you can introduce yourself. Where your agency? What agency are you, and what do you do?
Great, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Catanoso with the Department of Veterans Affairs in Office of Information Technology in the Enterprise Cloud Solutions Office, where I'm the director. A little bit of background. I'm from New Jersey. Shortly after college, I joined the Army as a signal officer, served in Germany doing a lot of telecom work, and then after the Army, did a lot of about 25 years of experience in industry, doing everything from large-scale database migrations to eventually enterprise cloud, both large companies and small. And I joined the VA in 2011, which as a veteran I thought was great to have an opportunity to maybe give back and serve a little bit. And ever since joining the VA, probably in 2013, started working on various cloud projects, eventually culminating in a Tiger team that started to build the VA Enterprise Cloud, where I'm now leading the team that's building and implementing that cloud for the VA.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, George?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Gorge Gagne. I'm with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency out of Hawaii. I'm the Chief Information Officer. A little bit of background, I've been in the organization for about 10 years prior to coming to DPAA within the accounting community. I work for Hewlett-Packard as a regional delivery manager for Hawaii and the Far East on a network some of you probably heard of, NMCI at the time. It's somewhat dated. Originally from Vermont, been in Hawaii for the last 22 years.
Well, Chris, George commuted in from Hawaii today, and you and I commuted in from Arlington. I think
That's
George
right.
got here first.
I think that could be true, yeah.
Yeah.
Traffic was as usual.
Yeah.
I'm Chris McDermott. I work with George at the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. I started about 18 years ago as a historian working on POW cases from World War II. At that time, we were looking things up on microfiche and microfilm and ordering paper records and storing them in archival boxes or in file cabinets. And over the last 5 years, we've been doing a big transformation of all of our effort to try to modernize our IT infrastructure, including trying to position all of our data in a cloud environment so that we can leverage that universe of clues for our global mission of finding the missing from our past conflicts, as well as providing all the information that the federal government can put together for the families about their loved ones.
That's great. And what we're seeing at AWS is we're seeing a lot of agencies use kind of their initial steps into the cloud and their thoughts about modernization as a jumping off point about a lot of architectural decisions. So I want to dive right in. And George, what are you doing in the cloud today?
Well, we have several cloud instances. We're leveraging infrastructure as a service. We also have a platform or software as a service as well. To give you a little bit of context, the accounting community has been around for a number of years. And in 2015, the Secretary of Defense, Hagel at the time, consolidated some of the organizations within the accounting community. They took the policy organization out of DC, along with Life Sciences Support Equipment Lab in Dayton, Ohio, and the organization that was responsible for the operational piece of the research, investigation, recovery out of Hawaii, and they consolidated those 3 organizations. So 3 geographical disparate locations, different cultures, different systems, and different processes. So the first thing we did was looking at, hey, how do we consolidate everybody on a single backbone and a single network, take all their systems, their applications, and their data, and consolidate into a cloud architecture. And that's where we leveraged our our case management system was developed via AWS infrastructure as a service. So it certainly helped us tremendously in our ability to communicate, collaborate, and coordinate with such a diverse staff globally dispersed around the world.
That's great. Maybe a question for both of you. How has this move impacted the way you interact with the public at DPAA?
Yeah, I mean, one of our challenges is building a platform that's sufficient for all of the DoD entities and secure on that front, as well as being able to flag the information within our system that needs to be able to be pushed to members of the public. So what we've been doing is architecting an AWS presence to allow us to quickly navigate all of our data and identify those things that we can provide more seamlessly to the public. Because one of the drivers of the consolidation of our mission was members of the public would ask someone in DoD a question and they wouldn't know which channel to direct the question. So you might get 5 different answers, or it might take 6 months to finally get an aggregated answer. So the value of having all the data hosted in one environment is that everyone can be on the same page, everyone can start from the same place. And that really enables us to be much more transparent with the families about the status of their case and any new information that comes along.
Yeah, that's great.
Coupled with that is, I just talked about 3 geographical locations we're located in. Around the globe, we have 8 fixed locations. We're highly mobile. We're going to be in 34 countries this year, conducting 84 missions, about 30 to 45 days per mission. So the ability to communicate, coordinate, and collaborate across that global workforce that's highly mobile, a cloud architecture environment is certainly a substantially increased our ability to coordinate and collaborate across our workforce, as well as with the public. It's certainly increased our transparency with the public and the family members. We have a presence with our case summary profiles. There's about 82,000 Americans missing that we're still trying to recover and locate. And we've created a case summary profile, which is a summary of that individual and their loss, a short paragraph. And out of the 82,000, we've gotten about 40,000 of those summary profiles.
That's great.
Out there.
Yeah. Dave, I'm going to switch to you. You mentioned in your intro, part of the reason you came to the VA was to come back and continue contributing and give back. What have been some of the things you're doing in the cloud, and what's that transformation process been like?
So one of the main things I noticed when I joined the VA in 2011 that I really wasn't aware of was just how large an organization it is. For those who don't know, the VA has almost 500,000 employees, so 480,000 when you count our university affiliates, volunteers, contractors. And so it's a large organization with 3 major lines of business. We have the Health Administration, we have the Benefits Administration and National Cemetery Administration, and of course all the corporate structures that go with supporting an organization of that size. And so that was really something that I noticed kind of struck me as, wow, this is an enormous organization, but it serves millions of veterans. And that's our primary focus. And one of the main things we're doing at the VA is IT modernization, to decommission legacy systems and migrate systems to the cloud. And our team really is responsible for building that enterprise landing area. We called it a beachhead, originally kind of the military guys that work with us. And so that's what we established, and now we're using that beachhead and expanding it and migrating application after application into our enterprise cloud.
Yeah. VA sounds a little bit like Amazon. You have about 500,000 employees, millions and millions of customers around the world. What advice do you have for those on their transformation and modernization journey?
One of the things I think we did, we started out, as mentioned earlier, as a tiger team, which was great. It kind of gave us the flexibility to work, but we didn't have a lot of authority to execute. And one of the things that really helped us expand and accelerate was establishing a formal office that became the focal point. And even more important than that was having senior leadership support to really sponsor us and help us get through some of the culture change issues, which in any large organization are natural when you make a change of this kind. So having that central focused organization and senior leadership support is probably something I would strive to put in place as quickly as possible if you're trying to do something similar.
Sure, it makes sense. So strong leadership, strong vision. You all have started this transformation journey. George, I'll come back to you. What are some of the lessons learned so far?
Well, I would say some of the things that I think we've done well versus some of the things I think we could have done better. Within the Department of Defense, there's a framework that the Chief Management Office has for business process reengineering, and I think we leveraged that and it worked to our advantage. I think what we did really well is define our problem statement. What is it we're trying to get after? Because if you think about it, a newly fledgling organization and having to consolidate with different cultures, different systems, and different processes. So I think it was critical for us to really nail down that problem statement. So I'd say in our planning aspects of this, certainly I think we did very well at defining that problem statement. I would also say that because we're such a dispersed workforce, one of our challenges, and there were several, I'd say one of the biggest ones is probably about our user communication and stakeholder buy-in with such a diverse workforce, geographically separated and highly mobile. Getting that stakeholder buy-in, I'd say we probably could have done better at that. Just geographical dispersion created some challenges for us with the different time zones, so on and so forth. I think another thing that we probably did that we did pretty well was the establishment of the Chief Data Officer's role. We hadn't had that in the organization before, and we saw a need of, hey, we have all this data, we've consolidated into a cloud environment and laid some applications on top of it. It's like, well, darn, now we have all this data. How do we use it? How do we manage it? How do we leverage all that data? So I think the establishment of the Chief Data Officer, as well as establishing a Data Governance Council, which was its representation from across our organization of what I would characterize as data owners that intimately know that data as a governing body and board of how you're going to use and manage the data. I think we did really well at that. I would say some of the challenges we faced when we started out, and I think we're going to continue to face, would be data hygiene. I think that's certainly going to be a challenge for us moving forward. It was in the past. I think that's going to have to, I think some of the answer, not the whole answer, is part doctrine, part personal discipline in quality control or quality management when you talk data hygiene. We don't have what I would characterize as big data. It's about 40 terabytes of data if I were to characterize it. In the big data scheme, it's probably pencil dust. But the ability to sift through that data, both structured and unstructured, and to determine what is relevant versus what is not, it's a mounting task that's pretty big.
You mentioned stakeholder communication and kind of buy-in in this distributed environment as one of the challenges you maybe could have gotten ahead of. Is there any what would you have done differently in that scenario, or are there other things that you would have done differently?
Go ahead, Chris.
I think one of the things would be to try earlier to get more of the capability fielded, even in a more primitive sense, to get the feedback loop started as early as possible in the process. Because we did a good job, as George said, of defining the overall problem, but the many, many steps that you need to get there and to maintain people's trust and confidence along the way is being able to deploy the capability quickly and make the changes that they're recommending in an iterative process as rapidly as possible. It makes a huge difference. Yep. I think, when you're promising somebody something and they take 2 years to see the result, it just gets very difficult to maintain their confidence and their trust that you're actually steering it in the direction that they want to go.
Sure. Almost sounds like continuous product launches.
Right.
You got to surprise and delight on some of that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
At least surprise.
Yeah. Dave, you work in a big distributed environment as well. What were some of the lessons learned for you at the VA?
Well, as you can imagine, it was a pretty daunting task to try to figure out how to implement something like this at the VA. And one of the things we learned early on is don't try to do it all in one contract. Don't try to write some giant contract that has everything from soup to nuts in it, one vendor providing everything. It just becomes too unwieldy. And we ended up breaking that up into smaller surgical tasks, and that's worked out really well for us in terms of execution over time. It gives us a lot more flexibility. It also lets us bring in experts for each task as opposed to one, more generic vendor. So that's been one of the big takeaways. Don't try to do it all in one bite.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. What would you have done differently?
I think basically make sure that you start out early and get early wins. We actually did do that, maybe not as fast as I would like, but don't step back and try to come up with an elaborate plan for all the applications in your organization, how you might migrate them over the years, and wait to do something. Right away, start trying to get early wins on the board. Try to go out and identify low-hanging fruit or high-value things that you can migrate to demonstrate that capability and build momentum, and that's key.
I think it's a question for all the panelists, and which is, oftentimes we think about digital transformation, maybe not rightly so, as a point in time, but it's an evolving process. It's something that's ongoing. It's organic inside of all of our enterprises. What do you see as the next steps in digital transformation in your organization?
Well, I think part of it is once the document or the information is available digitally, that's not the end of the work with that. You're transforming the way people interact with the information. And rather than each time going back to the same source or the same pile of information and rerunning everything, you want to constantly be able to build on that digital artifact. To keep adding new tags, to be able to show how it relates to other things, to reuse information and be able to mine the data over and over again, as opposed to approach each individual case as a separate task. So that's really where I think the end state is where our data is more commonly available, and we can offer it in ways that new innovations can be developed from that information, and we might find things that we hadn't thought about because now the data being digital has a lot more capability.
Yeah, makes sense. George, does the organization change because of that? Does it look different in the future?
I think to a certain degree, it looks different in that, we're at the infancy of leveraging cloud architectures. Our organization is, it's the tip of the iceberg. And for us, I would say, before it was, hey, being geographically dispersed and mobile was a disadvantage prior to leveraging cloud architectures. So now that we have these capabilities, where you're physically located really isn't an issue or challenge anymore. Time zone still becomes challenging at times when we talk about the ability to communicate, but accessibility and availability of the data is there. So it changes the dynamic and it changes the playing field, I think, tremendously across the board, not only for our organization, but any organization, public or within the Department of Defense or private. It certainly changes the game. And it's a force multiplier, so to speak, and an enhancer. You can actually start leveraging the different time zones and the capabilities because of the access to the data, instead of it being a challenge or a barrier to how you do your business.
Yeah, thanks. And Dave, what about you at the VA? What's the evolution of digital transformation? What are your thoughts?
So digital transformation is a large part of our IT modernization effort at the VA, and as you can imagine, we're all about delivering services to veterans, and we want to do that faster, more efficiently, provide services and interfaces to them that they're familiar with working anywhere else, commercial environments, so that they get a similar experience, or better tools for our staff to deliver those services to veterans. So in addition to the cloud being able to enable that flexibility or agility or speed of delivery, also allows us to save funds, which then can be reapplied to innovation and delivering better services. And then we're also changing the way we operate to a more DevOps model. That's been a new focus in our organization just recently, and it's really trying to pick up speed. So really, delivering better services to veterans is what we're really trying to achieve with a digital transformation at the VA.
I'll stay with you for a second, Dave, which is we spent a lot of years, a lot of us in the cloud business, just explaining what the cloud is.
Right.
And in some respects, we're still in the stage where it's thought of as storage and hosting. Now, we think of it as transformative. We kind of heard some nuggets here that there's some transformation that the cloud allows. What do you see the future innovations are of the cloud that the cloud can help drive for you beyond just storage and hosting and infrastructure?
Right, so as you can imagine, we are using a lot of storage and hosting at the VA, and we're in Amazon alone. I think we're approaching 3.5 petabytes already into Amazon.
You hear that, George? Your 40 terabytes.
And we're just getting warmed. We're really just getting warmed up. But as far as ways we can leverage the cloud for things, we're already trying things like using AI for chatbots on our IT service desk. considering using things like machine learning to help with diagnosis, interpreting images. So those are some of the areas right off the bat that we're trying to leverage. And Internet of Things is another area that different teams are looking at, to either some of the wearable technology that we can use to either monitor patients and provide remote diagnosis or patient care are all things that we're looking at.
Yeah. It's great. It sounds like Dave's got bigger files than you guys do, but that's okay. What do you see? What are some of the future innovations that you see that cloud can help you deliver?
I think, as we, mine data from the archives, as we get things digitally enabled, especially imagery, I think we see a lot of potential there. A lot of the remote sensing data that we collect for possible sites for excavation, being able to do predictive modeling of what the most likely scenarios are for where individuals may have ended up. A lot of our, loss incidents, we have a last radio contact or a last sighted position. We don't have, where everything ended up. So then being able to back plan, how do we, what are the range of scenarios that are most likely? What are the areas of most opportunity for us to continue our searches?
Yeah, great. How has cloud, George, how has cloud changed how you deliver mission capabilities or how you think about delivering mission capabilities today?
Yeah, I would say that, again, it certainly enhanced our ability, again, to communicate and coordinate without a doubt. It's changed, again, I say it's really changed the dynamics of the field of which we operate in. Again, about 20% of our organization is deployed somewhere around the world, about approximately 340 days of the year, and that's a highly mobile workforce. So it's certainly changed the dynamics of our ability to communicate. We use satellite communication systems, HF communication systems, to reach back to the case management system hosted on AWS. So it's changed the dynamics quite a bit, that digital transformation. If you think about it, if we had to go to all the national archives across the United States, foreign and domestic, and sift through all that paper, just think about the amount of manpower and time it would take to get this done. Or if you think about it, legacy on-prem system across disparate organizations, that information sharing, I think where we're headed, the next, and these two gentlemen talked about it, is an AI capability. But beyond that, it's information sharing across disparate clouds in different organizations within the accounting community. That's the next step. It's not just about business intelligence, extracting the data and presenting it to your target audience in a specific format, but it's about entering the data once, regardless of what organization you're in, and doing it only once and sharing that information. So that's something we're moving out on, is that information sharing across various cloud architectures and instances.
Okay. Dave, what about at the VA? Has cloud enabled you to move mission capabilities faster in a different direction? What's it done in terms of your agility and your speed?
Well, it's definitely demonstrating that we can do that. Like I said, we're just getting started. We have our beachhead established, and we've got about 40 applications in production now, and most of that has been designed to improve performance or enhancement or reduce costs of those applications. And as far as we're concerned, we hope users don't realize they're in the cloud. They just get better performance and a better performing application, and they shouldn't really care necessarily where it is, right? But that's really one of our goals. But it has enabled us even to demonstrate just in the IT community, if we have to troubleshoot a problem, we can literally fix things faster than if we were dealing with an on-prem piece of hardware. We literally updated the other day, troubleshooting a problem, one of our Amazon routers, on the fly during the day, to improve the NIC speed, and we did that without disrupting the users, almost without any advance notice. That would have taken weeks, likely, if an on-prem to do it even on an emergency basis. So it just delivers that ability to move quicker, and that's something that we're going to be able to leverage with our DevOps capability to deliver services faster.
That's great. You actually bring out an interesting point, which is this changes a little bit of the way that folks in our business work in the IT industry and the workforce. So have you seen that? How has the workforce changed? How do you think it's going to change going forward with cloud capabilities?
Well, I think it's going to change, it's going to free people up to do more work for veterans, in our case, right? Instead of spending time on process or equipment, It's going to free us up to think about how we can improve and deliver services to veterans and apply ourselves to solving those problems as opposed to solving more technical hardware-related problems. And it's going to change maybe some of the roles people have, but they're still going to be working to deliver services to veterans, maybe just in a different way.
Yeah, great. I think I'd ask the same question to you and George, to you and Chris, which is, how do you see the workforce changing? What do they need? What kind of skills are they getting? Those skills? What's that look like for you?
Well, I think it's about being able to deliver the capability where it's needed. And so on the one hand, you're trying to manage the expectations of the workforce, that they can do the tasks that they want to do. But you're also enabling it to be more of a seamless thing, the way it works in the commercial sector or the way it works in their university environment that they've come from. And we're really able to enable that experience now by getting the architecture platforms such that we can deliver that capability right in the way that they want. But it does mean that we have to transform the way we think about what their day-to-day tasks will look like. It'll be a lot less siloed work at your desk, and much more interacting with the information, providing force multipliers to data that's already in transit and in motion. And that's really what we're looking to transform and move toward. And as well as from the IT side, upskilling everything so that we can manage all of it in that AWS environment.
Yeah, I would say in the IT support model, specifically, I just learned about it yesterday, we've had a vehicle with AWS for professional services. One of the things we're looking at now is leveraging your certification training track and bringing in some of your staff to assist and assess where our IT capability gaps exist and helping us develop a comprehensive training plan to make sure we're properly supporting that model moving forward.
Yep. So. How does that change the culture, if it does, in the organization? I think you touched on a little bit of it, Chris, but how does that change the culture of the IT world we all grew up in?
Well, I would say not just for the technicians, but our user base. There's an apprehension when people feel that they're comfortable with a specific system that they've used for a number of years. It's right beside them. They can almost touch it and feel it and look at it. That comfort level. And when you make that transition to a cloud environment architecture, whether it's your support staff or your user base, there's a apprehension that's going to exist where a sense or feeling of loss of control or the unknown. And I think that's certainly a challenge so when we talk stakeholder buy-in with cloud transitions, it just doesn't apply to our user base. It also applies to our IT support staff as well. It's a shift, so there's certainly a challenge there. And I don't think there's any such thing as over-communicating in that environment when you're dealing with this, is being as open and transparent and honest about it as to, hey, how can it work to their advantage? And that's the nuggets is, what are the takeaways? What's the WIFMs for the individuals, whether you're an IT professional on the support side of the house or whether you're a data owner or user or a customer that's leveraging the data in the application.
Yeah, that common phrase, what's in it for me, right?
Right.
How do we, Dave, I'm curious on your thoughts, how do you make some of these changes, these cultural changes, upskilling? George, you mentioned the end users are an important constituency. How do you make these things stick inside of an organization?
Well, I think some of it's just gaining experience, right? So when we first started this, and understandably the VA has a lot of mission critical applications so that they can't fail, and there was a lot of concern whether, is the cloud reliable? Is it secure? Can it do the job? Will we be able to support it? And until we got one or two major applications out and demonstrated it could work in the cloud, those concerns were very intense. And as we demonstrated that it would work, you start to build credibility, momentum, and confidence that, we actually can do this as a team and it will work and we can deliver these services, and you start to gain that momentum and experience, and you gradually get people to understand and maybe become more supportive or more interested in working in the cloud as opposed to what they're used to doing. And the second thing is, invest in training, and we're putting training plans and opportunities in place so that as we bring teams into the cloud, they have an opportunity to take training on Amazon tracks, as they mentioned. So it's definitely a combination of train the staff and help them gain confidence in what's possible.
Yep. We mentioned chief data officer roles as really critical. What are some thoughts here about other ways to make this stick culturally? It sounds like having a chief data officer and data management and governance are all important.
Yeah.
What are other ways to get it to stick?
Well, I think it's been hit on a couple of times, but if you're trying to change your culture to one of innovation, that's a lot of change. So you have to be able to accommodate that change within your organization, and you have to encourage people to be willing to keep taking risks, getting things deployed as quickly as possible, trying to get to the quick win as quickly as possible. The more you build a culture that says we're going to keep pushing this envelope, especially when you start, at conferences like this, looking at the roadmap for the future, there's all kinds of things we still haven't begun to take advantage of that have been deployed for a couple of years. And if we want to have both that vision for 5 years from now, but also help bring everybody along the way. And that really involves a change in what people might think of as their day-to-day routine that's going to have embedded in it training, helping us with testing of these projects, and helping us roadmap the future.
That's great.
To that point, it's interesting because when we were first establishing the Defense POW MA Accounting Agency back in 2015, one of my first tasks that I put on my brain board, so to speak, was to go visit DLA. I had read an article about DLA and their transformation of moving to an enterprise service delivery model. And although their mission is significantly different than ours, what I found interesting, I met with Kathy Cutler, the CIO, and I asked her that question, Kathy, you're X years into your transition to an enterprise service delivery model. DLA is a globally dispersed workforce, I think just over 50,000 people across the organization. And I said, how did you deal with the change of culture, getting them to adopt it? And her comments were, George, hey, here we are X number of years into this, and it's still a challenge for us. It doesn't happen overnight, it takes time. I would say communication. I would say another area is where are the quick wins? Dave, you talked about where are those quick wins? For us, one of them was our business intelligence software. I'm sure you've heard it before, PowerPoint by death, or death by PowerPoint. And yeah.
Sometimes
It goes both ways.
It goes both ways.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard it before. And so with our business intelligence software, we were able to show our user base, hey, if you use this new tool, instead of spending the next 45 minutes building a PowerPoint slide, you can use business intelligence software to extract the data, a few clicks of a button, and you can build a report and a query, and it's going to save you so much time. So I would say quick wins is certainly a way to get that innovation and adopting the change in culture.
Yeah, great. Dave, I'm going to go to you with the last question because I think we got parts of it answered. You've got 40 applications or so and growing, moving to the cloud. I guess I would ask, do you have any advice for enterprises, agencies really just getting started on this modernization journey? What would be your one or two pieces of advice to get going?
I touched on it earlier, and I think the first thing I would try to do is to establish a centralized organization to be your focal point, and make sure you have a senior executive leadership that's behind that, because that was really key to our success. Having that leadership sponsoring us and championing us all along the way has been key to our success. And then the second thing I would say is establish a landing area. Find a spot in the cloud, frame it out, put your basic structures in place, leverage shared services, leverage, for the government folks in the room, authority to operate is key. You need that before you can turn any production system on. So you want to leverage the security controls provided by AWS to get that FedRAMP certification, and then you want to leverage what you build on top of that, get that ATO'd, so that you can then move applications into it, and those applications can then inherit from what you've built, and that makes their ATO process go faster. So those are some things I would try to structure it that way. And then again, try to find something easy you can move quickly so you can demonstrate that, hey, this will work, and get the workforce to understand this is possible, we can do it, and get as many people involved as possible. And I agree, communication is key. Try to communicate as much as possible throughout your organization to move that forward.
That's great. That's awesome. So for the security folks in the room, please give everybody fast ATOs so they can see me outside for a fast ATO. But no, this was really, really great. You all are doing unbelievably transformative work in your organizations and really leaning forward. We're excited. We're thrilled to be one of your partners on this journey, and it's definitely making an impact. It's definitely making an impact on your mission. So thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Yep. All right.